Hey everybody, welcome back. Alright, so in this lesson we are going to get on with the chord progression. So starting with the chord progression is one of the easiest ways to get inspiration for a track. And also, once you have a nice sounding chord progression, you can then use that as the basis for all the other musical elements like the lead melody, the bass line, and plenty more things, which of course we're going to get to as we progress. Now, it doesn't matter how you come up with the chord progression. It could be by using chord tools like Captain Chords, Scalar, and some DAWs like Cubase have their own versions of that. In Cubase, it's called chord pads. However, it's always important that you can then take that chord progression and be able to improve it, customize it, and also be able to make new parts out of it. And for that, you need just the most basic understanding of music theory. All right, so the most fundamental thing to understand is what scale your chord progression is using. So then you know what other notes in the scale you can use to either change the chord progression or notes that you can make the melody out of. In this case, we're using the A minor scale, so it's really nice and easy. It's just all the white keys, just like the C major scale. Now, this track is kind of musically as simple as it gets, at least the chord structure is. And one of the reasons for this was that A, it's a kind of pop track and simplicity is definitely a good idea when you're talking pop music. And also it's just a little bit easier for the guitar player to follow along when you just got sort of simple chords. All right, so first off, let's just add in a vital instrument. So we discussed how to do that in the last lesson. So I'm just going to add an instrument track. Make sure you got vital selected. I'm going to add that track. Obviously do whatever you need to do in your DAW to get vital up. Just for now, we're going to use the stock preset sound. Bit of a nasty sound, but that's absolutely fine. We're just getting the chords in there. Just going to turn it down a bit. And I'm also just going to make this a little bit longer. So it's over 4 bars. Set my loop region, and I'm just going to draw in a blank bit of MIDI on our vital track. In fact, let's just quickly rename this as well. Make sure it's nice and tidy. Vital pad is what this will end up being. And I'm just going to go in and let's start making the chords. So first things first, for people who are really new to all this sort of thing, I'm just going to draw in the notes of the scale so we know which ones we're using. So as I mentioned, it's all the white notes. So we start off with A. I'm just drawing this basically outside of the MIDI segment just so we can use this as a reference. These won't play. And then back to A again. So these are the notes we can use. And to make a basic triad is like the most easy thing in the whole world. All you do is pick whichever root note you want. So in this case, we'll do a 1 chord. So A. So you draw in a note on the root note, then you skip a note in the scale and add a note. Skip a note in the scale and add a note. And that is the same for literally every single chord in the scale. So for example, if I want to, let's say, just end on a 4 chord, all we do is count up 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's D. Then I skip a note in the scale, add a note, skip a note in the scale and add a note, which of course is A again. And then we got a 4 chord. All right, so through experimentation and generally sort of messing around and trying different chords out. Now, you can either obviously, like I say, do that using a chord program like Scalar or Captain Chords or whatever, or you can play it on a keyboard, which is actually what I did in this case. So you can just sort of mess around until you've got a nice chord progression that you like, or you can just mess around in the editor and try the different chords. So basically what I ended up on was obviously a 1 chord, a 3 chord. So I'm just going to copy this. So it's the 3 chord, I just need to change that middle note, and a 7 chord, but I just have this a little lower. So I have this on the G, and again, just need to change that middle note so it fits in with this scale. And literally, this is what we got. Now, just quickly to point out, one of the reasons that we use a 4 chord at the end is the sort of 95% of the time rule is that you always use, for the last chord of your progression, a 4 or a 5 chord. So that would be a chord starting with D, which is what we've got, a 4 chord, or a 5 chord, so that would start with E. And the reason for this is just that progression tends to resolve better when you go from a 4 or a 5 chord back to the 1 chord. So just something to think about as you are making chord progressions. What you can do, if you like, is literally draw in your 1 chord, draw in a 4 or 5 chord, and then just mess around with the 2 chords in between so you try and get something that sounds nice. Now, this is the chord progression that the guitarist will be playing later on, but there's one thing I want to do to this chord progression, which will end up being the pad. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. Now I'm just going to make a very simple voicing change. So voicing simply means you keep the same notes, but you can change the octave of them. So I'm going to highlight the middle notes, the thirds of all of these chords, and I'm just going to raise them up an octave. So rather than playing a C here, it's playing a C up here. So this is what it sounds like. In fact, I'll just undo that and play it. And then with the voicing change, just makes it sound a bit more epic. Now, again, this sound isn't right at all. We're going to be making that in the next lesson, the nice pad sound. And what we can also do here is duplicate the bass notes. So I'm going to select these, all the lowest notes, and I'm just going to copy them down 1 octave. So it just really sort of thickens that up. Now, it is very basic, that's for sure, but it will come to life more as we go through the tutorial. All right, so that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we are going to get into designing the pad sound in Vital. All right, thank you very much for watching, guys and girls. See you in the next one.